The countryside is supposed to be peaceful, quiet, safe. But tonight, you'll hear three real stories that prove otherwise. From eerie whispers in empty fields to encounters that defy logic. These are three true creepy countryside tales you won't forget. My name's Evan, and I'm 28. After my divorce, I ended up moving to a small town in Alabama called Chadam. I didn't have many choices, so I went to live in my late grandfather's house, the only place available to me besides my parents' home. He passed away a few years ago and left us the property. The house is about 10 minutes from town, sitting on 10 acres bordered by thick woods. It's incredibly quiet. I thought I'd enjoy the peace. The house itself is pretty old, creaky wooden floors, doors that stick, and it never quite feels warm no matter how much you adjust the thermostat. But it was free, and I didn't have a better alternative. The first few nights were uneventful. I spent time unpacking and cleaning. I'd sit out on the porch in the evenings with a beer, enjoying the calm. No cars, just the wind and the occasional owl call. Then the noises began. I first noticed it on the 7th night, just after midnight, as I was getting ready to sleep. I was nearly asleep when I heard someone whistling outside. It wasn't any song I knew, just a slow, broken melody, off pitch. It sounded like someone walking through the woods behind the house, whistling as they moved. It gave me the chills, but I assumed it was maybe a hunter or someone drunk. But the same thing happened the next night. Same time, same eerie whistle, only it sounded even closer. I turned on the porch light and stepped outside with a flashlight, but there was no one there. No signs, no footsteps, just the tune fading into the woods. I tried to brush it off. For a couple of nights, I stayed in bed and tried to ignore it. But every night around 1:17 a.m., the sound would start, sometimes a minute earlier or later, but always right around that time. It felt too precise to be random. I started thinking maybe someone was deliberately trying to scare me, knowing I was living alone. Eventually, I contacted the sheriff's department. An older deputy, let's call him Deputy H, came by. He'd been in law enforcement for decades. When I explained what was happening, he got unusually quiet. Then he said, word for word, "Your granddad used to call us about the same thing. Said someone was whistling near the property late at night, always in the spring. He said they never found anything. Thought maybe my grandfather was just getting old. But now I was hearing it too." That really unsettled me. I had no idea my grandfather ever dealt with that. Deputy H told me to keep the place locked up and not to go outside at night. I took his advice seriously. I was already doing most of that. I double-checked windows and even jammed chairs under doorknobs. Still, the whistling got closer. One night, I heard it right by the shed, loud and near. I peeked through the blinds with my flashlight. Saw nothing. Didn't dare step outside. The next night, the sound came from the porch, right outside the front door. 3 drawn-out whistles, then silence. Then the following night, it came from under the house. I swear, I heard it through the vents, like someone was down in the crawl space. I didn't sleep a second that night. The next day, I searched the attic for anything my grandfather might have left. I found a box of his journals. He had written about the same thing, the whistling, happening every spring for over 10 years. He never figured out who or what it was, but always had the feeling someone was watching the house. He mentioned keeping a rifle by the door when he was alone after my grandmother died. I called Deputy H again. He returned, read the journals, and looked nervous. He warned me again. If you don't know who's at the door, don't open it. That night, I sat in the living room with a shotgun on my lap. I barely knew how to load it, but I was ready. Right at 1:17, the whistle came, this time from inside the house. It echoed from the hallway. I froze. The light in the hallway was off. I could hear footsteps, soft, measured, getting closer. I got up, aimed the shotgun, and shouted, "Who's there?" The sound stopped. I flicked on the light. No one. I didn't sleep again. 2 nights passed without a sound. I started hoping it was over. On the 3rd night, I went to bed early and left the hallway light on. At exactly 1:17 a.m., I woke to a new sound. Knocking. Slow, spaced-out knocks. 3 of them from the book door. Then silence. I didn't move. Stayed in bed. A minute later, I heard the floor creak in the hallway. Then again. Someone walking. The hallway light turned off. I grabbed the shotgun, heart racing, and stepped out. The hallway was dark, but at the end of it, someone was standing. Pale face, dressed in black, completely still. I lifted the shotgun with trembling hands and said, "Don't move." They slowly lifted a foot and turned, like they were about to run. I yelled, "Stop!" and they bolted. I heard heavy footsteps as they dashed out the front door into the night. I chased after them and fired once into the darkness, hoping I might hit something. I screamed, "Don't come back!" The sound of the shot echoed off the walls. I locked the house, jumped into my truck, and drove to town. Slept in the truck that night. The next morning, Deputy H came out. The front door was unlocked again. That confirmed it. Whoever it was, they had a key. Nothing stolen, but Deputy H said I should change the locks. He also unofficially suggested I get out. He said something out there didn't like me, or my grandfather, living in that house. That same day, I drove to the hardware store and changed every lock. Then I left to stay with my parents in another state. My dad handled selling the place later. We took anything of value and left the rest. He never told the buyers about the years of whistling or the strange intruder. I still don't know who it was or how they got the key, but I know what I experienced was real. Some creep had been watching that house for decades. I don't believe in ghosts, but I believe someone was out there, and I'll never live in the woods again. I'm 16 now and live in the city, but I spent the first 8 years of my life in a rural village. Some people might think it's strange, but ever since I was little, I was allowed to walk around the village without adult supervision. The area was tiny, maybe 90 people at most, so everyone knew everyone, down to recognizing who drove which car. It was a scorching summer afternoon, and my friend, let's call him Julian, and I were dying for a cold Coke. Back then, sodas were cheap at the corner stores, but we still needed a few more coins to afford 2 cans. That's when an elderly lady called us over. She said she was planning to make mint tea for her birthday celebration, but had run out of mint. She offered us as much soda as we wanted if we could fill 2 plastic bags with mint leaves. We thought it was a perfect trade. I didn't want to bother my parents for money anyway. Later that day, we began searching. The sun was burning our skin, and we were soaked in sweat. Despite our effort, we could barely fill even half of 1 bag. We were frustrated, realizing we'd never finish before sunset. Still, we kept walking, hoping we'd stumble upon a patch of mint plants. Out of nowhere, 2 tall boys showed up. Well, they looked tall to us, probably around 5 feet 7 inches, but as 7-year-olds they seemed huge. They were dressed head to toe in black, with big hoodies and skinny jeans. Even though their faces weren't clear, they didn't look older than 17. They spoke to us in oddly friendly voices, sounding almost childlike. "Are you kids out here alone?" one asked. Julian glanced at me and subtly motioned for us to leave. I didn't catch on. Body language wasn't my strength, so I cheerfully told them, "Yeah, we're just looking for mint." Then I asked if they knew where we could find some. I swear I remember one of them grinning when I said that. He crouched and patted my head, and Julian quickly pulled me back, clearly alarmed. He asked, "Who are your parents?" A question that in our village was answered by giving your family name. Since the community was so small, that's how people identified each other. Julian knew almost everyone, and it was clear these two weren't from around there. He must have sensed something was off. The guys dodged the question and kept focusing on me. Then one of them said, "Actually, we know a big mint field. See that hill? That's where we came from. We can show you." Julian and I knew that hill well. We played there all the time. But we'd never seen any mint growing there. Only corn, grapes, and some watermelons. Still, I didn't think much of it. I tugged on Julian's arm to follow them. They started leading us toward the hill. We were getting farther and farther from the village, and I could feel Julian's hand shaking. Suddenly, I felt a chill. Our village was out of sight, and the forest loomed ahead. I saw no mint field, just trees. When I asked the guys where exactly we were going, they gave vague answers like, "You'll see," or "Just wait." Fear started to crawl through me. I slowed down, panicked, but kept moving, like I was frozen in place. I knew something was wrong, but my body wouldn't stop. Then Julian leaned close and whispered, barely audible, "These guys are bad. Run." That was it. He took off sprinting downhill, still gripping my hand. I ran like my life depended on it, because it probably did. I heard the guys yelling behind us and giving chase. I was sobbing, terrified, barely breathing, but somehow we ran nearly 2 kilometers without stopping. When we got back, the woman who sent us out saw us in tears, completely pale. She took us in and gave us chocolate to calm us down. When she asked what happened, Julian told her everything. I was too shaken to speak. She scolded us, especially Julian, who lied and said I had wanted to stay behind, but he insisted on trusting the strangers. Julian got grounded for a month, and I spent a long time getting over the fear. We never found out who those boys were or what they really wanted. But now, looking back, I think I have a pretty good idea, and it's terrifying. Had I tripped on that hill, who knows what could have happened. I owe everything to Julian, who's now my boyfriend. I don't even want to imagine how differently that day could have ended. My parents used to work nonstop when I was a kid. Both of them held down 2 jobs because they needed the extra money to support my older brother Cameron and me. Their work kept us financially afloat, but it meant they were hardly ever home. So they ended up finding a babysitter through some website. She was a young white woman, maybe in her early 20s, named Michelle. For around 4 to 5 months, Michelle would come by every weekday to look after us. Back then, I was 7 and Cam was 8, and we really enjoyed Michelle's company. She was youthful, kind, and full of energy. Way more fun than some grumpy older babysitter. Since traditional school wasn't practical for our parents' schedules, Cam and I took online classes, and Michelle helped us with that too. When summer came, my parents told Michelle to take a well-deserved break and enjoy her summer. She'd done a lot for us, but that also meant we didn't have a sitter anymore. Instead of going through the process of finding someone new, they decided to drop us off at our grandparents' place. Our grandparents lived out in the Texas countryside, quite a ways from our home in Oklahoma, but since we'd be staying all summer, the drive was worth it. We left on a Saturday, and though the scenery was lovely, it felt like the longest, most stomach-churning ride of my life. Eventually, we arrived at their place, a medium-sized cabin surrounded by open fields and dense woods. Off to the side, there was a barn-like building with space for animals like goats, chickens, and cows. After the greetings, Grandpa was eager to show Cam and me around. My parents stayed inside chatting with Grandma while she made dinner. That evening was wonderful. We caught up with our grandparents and played with their dog, Cora. Cam and I shared a room with a bunk bed and a small TV. Next door, our parents had their own room. Exhausted from the drive, Mom and Dad went to bed quickly since they had work Monday morning. Cam and I stayed up a bit longer watching cartoons until we both fell asleep. But around 2 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside the window. Heavy ones. I couldn't see anything because of the blinds, and the noise didn't wake Cam since the TV was still on. Then I heard a strange noise, like someone trying to open the window, followed by a low grunt. I rushed to wake my parents and told them what I'd heard. They didn't really believe me, probably thinking I imagined it, but they checked anyway. No one was there. They figured it was an animal. We were in the middle of nowhere. Maybe they were right. I lay awake for 5 more minutes before falling back asleep. The next morning the house smelled like Grandma's delicious cooking, and my parents were packing to leave. After breakfast, they headed back home. Later that morning, Grandpa took Cam and me out to feed the animals and brought Cora along for a walk. I wanted to hold Cora's leash, and he handed it over, telling me to hold on tight. As we walked, I noticed Cora slowing down every few steps. When I turned to see why, I saw her staring intently into the woods. I hesitated, then looked, and saw a dark figure standing among the trees, watching us. Though the figure was completely black, I could feel it was looking right at us. He was partly hidden behind a tree, hands gripping the trunk, leaning in to peek around with his whole body. I turned to alert Grandpa, but he and Cam had walked 15 feet ahead. I hurried to catch up, dragging Cora with me. When I told Grandpa what I saw, the figure had vanished. No signs, no sound, nothing. It was like he'd disappeared. I should have seen him run, but there was no movement at all. Since Grandpa already knew about the noises I'd heard the night before, he didn't think I was just imagining things. I could see concern on his face, though he told me it was probably just a deer and that my movement scared it off. We went back home after feeding the animals and spent the day playing in the sprinklers and watching movies. That night, Grandma made an amazing dinner. After eating, I was exhausted, so I took a short bath and headed to bed with Cam. We watched cartoons again and drifted off to sleep. At around 1 a.m., I woke up to humming outside the window, the theme song to Cyber Chase, the show we'd left playing. Cam didn't stir, but I clearly heard it. I figured it might be Grandpa outside, maybe smoking and humming along with the TV. It didn't make much sense, but I was just a kid. I called out, "Grandpa!" The humming stopped. After about 30 seconds of silence, I heard, "Hey, it's Grandpa. Come out here, kid. I want to show you something cool." I put on my shoes and stepped outside. There were no lights, but the night sky looked incredible. When I got to the window, I saw Grandpa standing there, holding out his hand. I grabbed it, and he began walking me toward the barn. I tried asking where we were going, but he didn't respond. Something started to feel off. Why would Grandpa be showing me something at 1 a.m.? And why was he wearing a hoodie with the hood up? Then I looked down at his hand. It didn't look like Grandpa's. It was younger. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. I stayed quiet, not wanting to alarm him, even though my heart was pounding. Then I saw something, the handle of a long tool sticking out of his waistband. Panic set in. Just then, I heard Grandpa's real voice calling from the house. The man turned his head toward the sound. In that split second, I yanked my hand free and stepped back. The man stared at me for a moment, then bolted into the woods. I sprinted back, yelling for help. Grandpa met me with open arms, and Grandma was already calling the police. Officers arrived quickly and began searching. They eventually found the man hiding in a nearby ditch. Inside the ditch, they found stolen items from the barn and most disturbing, an axe tucked into his pants. After investigating, they discovered someone had broken the lock on Grandpa's shed, leaving dangerous tools accessible. A few days later, we learned that the man was Michelle's ex-boyfriend. We'll call him Dave. He confessed to stalking us and admitted he'd planned to abduct me that night. He thought threatening a child Michelle cared about would force her to come back to him. He claimed he never intended to hurt me, just wanted leverage to get Michelle back and start a new life with her. After this, our parents picked us up early and decided to find new jobs that would allow them to spend more time at home. They also cut ties with Michelle, understandably. I'm grateful the police were nearby, but even more thankful Grandpa got up that night to use the bathroom. Even after 2 decades, I still shudder thinking about what might have happened that night.